Welcome, Visionaries. This is your host, the INFJ Visionary. And the topic of today's broadcast is intuition. It's sort of funny we haven't gotten to this since this is our driving force. This is the thing that motivates us, moves us, animates us. It's our compass. What a crazy compass it is, too. It's so vast, right? But ultimately, I was listening to a broadcast today. It was very, very woo, and I won't get into a bunch of theories about whatever, since everyone's got different views, and that sort of is the point, which is one of the points that the guest on this broadcast was making, was that it's almost impossible to know what the truth is anymore. And he said it's almost impossible for him to follow. He's a bit of a journalist, movie maker. He says it's almost impossible for him to follow up on any story and get the truth anymore. And maybe you've noticed that. And so often what people are, I think most people, I think INFJs, we tend to be, it's not that we don't love truth. We love truth above all else, I think. But we know that it's quite difficult sometimes to label something as true or not. Very often it's contextual, and I'm not saying that truth is relative. That's called moral relativism, and that's not my thing. That's a pretty dark path if you get on it. But just because you believe that there is a such thing as something being true or not doesn't mean that it's going to be easy for you to discover that truth. Or you may never actually know if something's true or not. So what do you do? And that brings us back to the topic of today's broadcast. You rely on your intuition. And I've probably told this story before. I know I have in my own life, maybe here on the broadcast, but you know, we're closing in on broadcast number 30 here. Long story short, I had a job, in a manufacturing operation. I was doing all kinds of work up in the front office, getting inventory in, managing the people in the back, organizing the workflow. It was just too much work to do, and I was quite a young man at the time. And what I found myself increasingly doing was relying on my intuition to get the job done. And I found, getting to my point, hopefully I think I have told the story before, but that's okay, because it's a very pivotal point in my life, in my young life, where I not only did it really solidify in my mind what intuition was, which is something I was always using, but that when you use it all the time, when you rely on it, it becomes rock solid. It's almost impossible to throw off. I'm not saying, sometimes we are wrong. And I had a friend who was an INTP, and if you know any INTPs, they're all about the internal logic. That's their driving force. That's their compass. And that's one of our functions as well, too. So we get a good amount of overlap with those guys in that regard. Although we'll talk about other things that can fall out from that later in other broadcasts. But I said, hey, friend, I says, you're so good with that logic, is there anything that ever trips you up or throws you? And he's like, yeah, fear. Fear is the thing. When fear is involved, then our superpowers all become weak. In the case of the INTP, their superpower of finding the logical thread in anything, and that's their means of discerning the truth. And we like logic quite a lot too, and that's one of the reasons that we're so incredibly feared. You're special, INFJ. Everyone's afraid of you and knows you're special. Whatever. Like that's going to help you or make you feel better, or if it's not even true. But it could be relatively true. Getting back to my point. But no, our guiding light, our compass is intuition. And I was talking to another friend recently, and we have a very deep conversation. And one of the things I was talking about, the God or the universe, and I'm not going to go down too deep a rabbit hole here, but to me, God must be logical. However, intuition trumps logic. But then I said to my friend, but it's got to be logical. And I think that's a total INFJ statement. Yes, intuition trumps logic, but we're always going to seek to bring into logic, to confirm our intuition. And that's one of the reasons why we can make spectacularly accurate forecasts. It's one of the reasons we know all about people, even though they haven't said anything to him. I remember being a young person and telling another friend of mine, I have no idea what sort of type he was. It sure wasn't an INFJ, and I was maybe in my teens still. I'd never heard of INFJ, but I remember telling him, I said, when I go into a room, I can tell everything that's going to happen. He's like, what? And I said, that sounds like total bullshit. And to myself, I just said, "Oh, note to self: don't communicate that to people. They don't. You're alone in that." Maybe not everything is going to happen, but we feel all the emanations of the potential possibilities. And there was a comment on one of the broadcasts recently where someone had mentioned how people don't really like being read, and that's if you're letting on that you're reading them. To be honest, I don't often do that. They don't want to know that you're reading them, and it's probably best that you keep that to yourself, and use that information if you can to help them. Quite often, I'll do that. But now that I'm older and wiser, I see what happens when you get too involved with other people's problems. What happens is you get extricated, and what also happens is it gets quite dicey for you because people think you're one person. They think you're the helpful, giving person, which is, obviously part of what you are. But it's not all you are. No, sir. What you are is the wellspring of intuitive knowing, right? And everything else from there is kind of fill in the blanks, which is a lifetime process. And that's one of the reasons why I felt I was ready to take on my role as the INFJ visionary. And by the way, I'm not saying I have any powers. Any of you do not. I'm not saying I have any powers at all. I'm just here, and I open myself up to the NI Oracle, and I communicate to you. Sometimes, in fact, we can talk about the other thing I was thinking of mentioning at the end of this broadcast. I was going to talk about, well, hey, it slipped my mind, so we'll leave it for another time. It was something about the self, but better probably to keep things on the straight and the narrow. So, what do you do if maybe you're smart enough not to try to get too deep into current events, but the world's getting very crazy, very active. Like this one journalist I was listening to was saying he's got 10 stories a day he could cover. It used to be that he says any one of them he could turn into a full show. There's a lot going on in the world. We are approaching what Terence McKenna would call the eschaton. Possibly we are. Who knows? But things are speeding up, and the whole future does seem to be happening concurrently. And for my advice to you is, I don't think that brings us as much anxiety as INFJs as it might bring types that are, standing on more solid ground. One of the things that defines us is that yes, we have a physical body. Yes, we have an outward-facing persona, as I pointed out, which is mostly cobbled together. Yes, we have a self, and we know that self intimately. But what we are the face of is the vast abyss of intuition. We're tied into every aspect of the universe, both human and non-human. And now, of course, we don't open ourselves up to every aspect all at the same time. That would drive you mad, but we can do. We can, and intuition's there for you. Call on it today. Till I come back, just hang in there, INFJ.